Hello, and welcome to GERSA Cast. This is our third podcast. Our last one was a politically incorrect mammal. In this one, we have returned to the side of the angels, and we have two of the women on the founding team at GERSA, Birgit Hirst and Paige Grinter. What's more, and putting the men to shame, it's the Brainiacs podcast. Because Birgit and Paige both have MBAs and are the only people on the team who have them. Respect, ladies, or chapeau, as I am fond of saying. So, in keeping with the two previous podcasts, we will be talking about the experiences that Birgit and Paige bring to GERSA and what excites them as individuals about what they're doing. So let's get on with it. Birgit, if I can turn to you first, tell us about your career experience, and in particular, relevant career experience and what you bring to GERSA.
Sure. Thank you, Nick. I spent nearly 10 years in international education, most recently. So I worked for two great organizations, Navitas and StudyLink. Let me briefly tell you about each. So Navitas, pathway provider, Australian-based. Some people might say is the godfather of pathway because that's where it was invented. And my role there was to work in strategy and business development, that being developing partnerships with universities to have a pathway relationship with them so that Navitas could provide the pathway and the universities would teach. These were very, very close relationships normally, really built on trust. They lasted 10, 20 years and more. So a really big investment and really needed to build trust there in the sector with the universities. And then after that, I joined StudyLink, which is also part of the Navitas family. So I didn't, in a way, go too far, but working on the tech angle of international education. So StudyLink is a software provider, market leader in Australia for international student recruitment and admission solutions. So basically, they help particularly agents recruit international students for universities. And my role there was to bring that fantastic solution into the Northern Hemisphere, particularly into the UK, Canada, and the US. So learned a lot there about the sector, about what agents want, how that whole process works, and also what universities are looking for, what some of the risks are, where it's going well, where the concerns are, what keeps an international director and a DVC or PVC international up at night, that kind of stuff. Lots of conversations of that sort. Then previously, prior to that, I actually started my career in management consulting with the Boston Consulting Group. Was very hard work, but a great place to sort of learn the basics, learn the toolkit about how do you approach a problem, how do you solve a problem, how do you think about things strategically. So that was really good training. And then afterwards, I thought strategy is great, but actually where the rubber hits the road is where strategy needs to be implemented. And so I then joined various organizations in-house in a strategy and transformation role. Just to pick out one of them, I worked for the World Gold Council for a couple of years. So that's an organization that promotes gold and the usage of gold on behalf of the largest gold mining companies in the world. And there actually, what was interesting in the GERSA context, they had a similar challenge in the industry. You probably wouldn't be too surprised that gold mining at times can be controversial because it's conducted in very remote areas with indigenous peoples, environmental concerns, all of that. So that industry needed a license to operate and to continue operating. And one of the projects that I was involved in there was to set a responsible gold standard, how you make sure there are no human rights abuses, no environmental abuses, while gold is being mined, to instill trust in gold, in that commodity. And we've done that very successfully, where the industry signed up to that standard. And we believe that that has helped gold in the market. And I guess it's also not a secret either that the gold price is soaring at the moment. I'd love to say that's all due to me. I'm sure it's not, but well, I know it's not. But anyway, it's nice to see a success story. So
Birgit,
yeah,
can I,
yes,
can I just interrupt you there, actually? Because there's something I'd quite like to tease out about that. The World Gold Council is a non-profit, right?
that's correct. Yes, so it's funded by the corporate gold mining companies, and it is not meant to make any money. Correct.
So it's an example of global stakeholders coming together, supporting a non-profit organization to eliminate exploitation of vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. They can really see that that was in their interest. I mean, it probably helped to some extent that the World Gold Council was already a membership organization that was already formed. However, this type of project was completely new. So what they had done to date was they had promoted various gold-based ventures. They had invested in some ventures. They had invested in advertising and sort of jewelry undertakings, but in a fairly traditional way. This was really new. And also, let me tell you, that was not easy. That was not like, one day you show up in a big meeting or workshop with all these representatives of gold mining companies and they all say, that sounds fantastic. I'm going to sign up to this tomorrow. It worked quite quickly actually because they could really see the need. However, it was a challenging process, but I think ultimately it was helped by the fact that everybody realized it had to be done. Otherwise, that industry might not exist in its current form.
Interesting. Sounds very familiar. Paige, I'm gonna move on to you now, if I may. I appreciate it's quite a challenge to talk after Birgit and her experience, but tell us about yours and what you bring to GERSA, please.
So first thing to say, I fell into international education entirely by accident. I needed a job when I was at university in my summers, and I heard of this very cool place where international students would come and learn English and see kind of the cultural sites of the UK whilst they were doing it. And I thought that sounds great. So I got a summer job there. And then as I was graduating, was offered a full-time role, which at the time I was thinking that I would work for a year and then go back to university. I had kind of aspirations of going into the medical profession. And that was 12 years ago. So yeah, sorry, mum, sorry, dad. I never became Dr. Page, apologies. And the organization was Kaplan International. So I was, very fortunate to have accidentally wound up in one of the kind of world leading organizations there, which was really fortunate considering I knew nothing about it. And from there, really, the 12-year career kind of culminated in me in a global operations role, but also formalizing Kaplan's corporate social responsibility program. And I've always been personally motivated by kind of giving back. So being able to do that in a work capacity with KI was a dream come true, really. And as an education company, we sort of focused our efforts on education because that's what we do. So we were looking kind of at home, educating refugees in our language schools, but also further afield. So supporting projects with the corporate charity partner Plan International, helping displaced children in Nigeria get back into education.
That's really, really interesting. And if I may, I'm going to come back to you on one particular point. CSR or corporate and social responsibility is a term that is used a lot in industry and the wider world. It's not something we hear much about in international education, to be honest. But I'd like to know how that experience resonates or overlaps with what we're doing at GERSA, because you are the only person I know in international education who has a CSR background.
Oh, so I mean, the kind of the crux of it is trying to do the right thing, using the facilities, using the knowledge, using the expertise that you have around you. So obviously Kaplan is an enormous education provider in various different fields, whether it's English language training, whether it's financial literacy, etc. So being able to kind of use your expertise for good is a really kind of obvious angle, I think, for a big organization like Kaplan. And it's testament to them that they kind of are happy to do this and speak so openly about it. And I think for GERSA, there are some real similarities in that, we've all worked in the industry in different places over different organizations and for differing amount of years, but we have this knowledge that's been built up, and we can see the good that it does, and we can also see where there's room for improvement. So I think the overlap there is really kind of using your expertise to kind of enhance the good that a product or a service is able to offer.
Fabulous, thanks. I'm now going to move on a little bit and ask you both to explain your roles and what you expect to be doing, not in the next 3 or 4 months while we're still in startup mode, but when we're humming along next year, what will your roles look like? So explain those roles first and then what they will look like. Birgit, please.
Right, so I'm the Chief Commercial Officer designate. So actually interesting, Nick, I'm not sure if we've had an in-depth conversation exactly what that role looks like, but I will tell you what I think it does and I would like it to do. For one, immediately there's a need to formulate the business plan and structure a really great funding opportunity for people who want to support us financially and get us started. So that's the first thing. As we get into a steady state, I expect that role to oversee all the commercial decision making. So GERSA operates in a two-sided market. So we work with agents, we work with universities or education providers in the broadest sense. So what does that mean? How do we structure our pricing? How do we make sure we don't put barriers in the way to work with us? How do we get maximum number of agents signed up, maximum number of universities signed up? What's our go-to-market strategy in different places? So these are the questions, quite from a strategic point of view, but also with a heavy commercial angle as to ultimately, I guess I'm on the hook for delivering the business plan as we've written it as a team. So if that goes off track or if changes need to be made, I'll be the person to do that. And also I'll be the person to make sure it stays on track as much as possible. But as we all know, who's ever been involved in a startup knows that sort of 2, 3, 5 years on, it does not look the same as it did on day one or how the founding partner sort of envisioned it. So yeah, I'm the person to make sure that is well and alive and fit for purpose.
So you heard it first here, ladies and gentlemen. If GERSA fails, then Birgit is on the hook.
Yeah,
It will be Birgit and Birgit's sole responsibility.
Yeah, as the team knows, I'm not a heavy social media user, so hurl all the abuse at me you like, but keep it to social media, please. No phone calls, no visits.
Paige, can you explain what you're going to be doing and again what that looks like at steady state?
Yeah, so I'm the operations director designate, and essentially that's responsible for ensuring that the business is operational in kind of whatever that means. I say this often, but I'm a generalist. I think that's the polite term to coin. Jack of all trades, master of none is probably the less polite version. So really, it's ensuring that every aspect of the operations are up and running so that we can function. That's enhancing quality of the product that we're offering. It's optimizing processes and delivery. And I think the most important thing for me, and the thing that I enjoy most about it, is ensuring that there's a strong collaboration between the teams, that we're not working in silos, that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction, really for the best possible outcome.
Excellent. Thank you. I mentioned in the intro that you both have MBAs. Sticking with you, Paige, because I'm actually very curious. I've been recommended an MBA many times. What skills? What will that background of you? What will you bring to bear as a result of that?
As I just said, I'm a total generalist, and I think an MBA is a really great program for generalists. It gives you kind of different oversight into different areas of business. So I'd had nothing to do with marketing in my entire life, and then did a module on marketing. So it gave me like all of this new exposure in these different areas. I think for me, the really big takeaway from it, and the thing that I'll be bringing to GERSA, is knowing that an organisation is more than just the sum of its parts. Like we all contribute, and you're able to kind of step back and look at a project or an organisation in a much more kind of holistic way, and see how everything contributes, and how everything really influences the success.
Great, thank you. Birgit, you have an MBA. Of what value is it in GERSA's context?
Yeah, I guess my MBA is quite a few years longer ago than Paige, and that's because Paige is much younger than me. Yeah, listen, why did I do an MBA? At the time, is because people told me it would bring credibility and also earn you more money than sort of equivalent degrees in other disciplines. And, I started out wanting to be a psychologist. So even in that setting, wanting to be a psychologist in the business world, people have said, you can do a doctorate in psychology or you can do an MBA. The latter will bring you more credibility and more money. And I thought, well, that sounds pretty good. So at the time, I also lived in the US, so it felt like that was the right way of sort of finishing up my stint in the US and my education there. So that's why I went. I think I'm surprised actually how much I still use some of the things I've learned. And, as Paige said, it's very broad. And when you go into the business world, you will encounter situations where people are trying to undermine you or rattle you, particularly as a woman, I think. And just having heard of things, having a solid foundation in finance, accounting, marketing, economics, even operations management, data science, all of these things, it's not so easy to rattle me, I don't think, because most things I know enough to be dangerous to some extent. So at least I can hold my own, and that is a really good feeling and has given me a lot of confidence. I think, in addition to that credibility, which I think it has inevitably brought, and it's certainly opened doors as well. But in terms of the knowledge you have, I apply these things. Probably my favorite course, and I went to MIT, so it's quite sort of techy and quant heavy. I did an operations management course, and I still think about that all the time, about what are the bottlenecks here? What is the critical path? What is the thing I now need to fix first? It really gives you that foundation, how to identify a problem, analyze it, and solve it. And that's been great in professional life as well as in personal life to some extent.
I love the way you just casually dropped in MIT, like one of the
But
top
it was
five
the one that took
MBAs.
me in.
Right. I'm going to get personal now. And I want you to talk about your personal motivation for GERSA. Because let's face it, no one's getting paid to be on this podcast, let alone all the other work we're doing. So there must be something driving you to do this. So sticking with you, if I may, Birgit, what's your motivation?
Yeah, listen, I've been, as I said, in international education for sort of coming up to 10 years soon. I've been an international student myself in the US, and that has been an experience that has truly transformed my life. People say that quite casually here and there, oh yeah, that's changed my life. That it has truly transformed my life in that it has given me more confidence. It has given me the skill sets to be successful. And it has taught me lots of other sort of shaped my personality, given me better social skills, all of that. And I'll be eternally grateful for having had that opportunity. And it wasn't easy to organize that. There are lots of barriers in the way if you want to study abroad. It's the default thing is always you stay where you are. So I want that experience to be available for as many people as possible if they want it. I want that experience to be available for my children. I can currently see a real threat to the ability of people to be mobile for education, particularly, I mean, I don't have to reiterate it because we've covered it in previous podcasts, and collateral. Um, in the big Anglophone destinations, that is certainly under threat. We cannot take that for granted. And there are people who sit back and hope that other people do something about that. And there are some people who try to do something. And I think I'm now at a time in my career and um, where I think I can afford to get involved in this. And what I really want is this sector to renew the license to operate. And I think that is what GERSA is trying to do. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of that.
Wonderful. Thanks very much indeed, Birgit. Paige, why are you working 12-hour days when you could be working 8-hour days?
So part of my previous life at Kaplan saw me being the safeguarding lead for the UK and Ireland schools. So I suppose I've got a real understanding firsthand, working directly with students about their experience, moving abroad, often not understanding the language fully, not having a support network around you, and really kind of understanding then how important it is to ensure that there's wraparound support for them on their programs. And I suppose, the sadder side of things, I'm aware of the real costs when that support isn't there. And the support ranges from the agent piece right at the beginning when they're counselling them on where they should go and what they should study, which is so important. But then all of the experiences that they have on their programs, with the teams in the universities or the language schools. It's a big ecosystem that we're operating in. So there's lots of different kind of facets to it. That we need to ensure is correct, because at the end of the day, it's a person with hopes and dreams, and they want to come somewhere and learn something new, experience something different, and it's something they will remember forever, as Birgit said. So it's our duty morally to do it correctly, but also it's so important that we do, because when things do go wrong, they have the capacity to go very wrong, and we've touched on that in previous podcasts too. And I suppose on a personal note, I really do personally understand the transformative power of education. I come from a very small rural town in Wiltshire, and I never imagined in a million years that I'd be living in big city London and working with people from places that I'd never heard of when I was a child. So yeah, education is amazing. It opens doors, and just to be able to make sure that as many people are enjoying that opportunity, as Birgit said, is really, really motivating.
Thank you. So let's get on to the here and now. What are you both working on, and what can we expect to hear about? Birgit.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm working on our business plan and structuring that funding opportunity for organizations who want to be part of an innovative, groundbreaking, but also very necessary initiative in our sector. So I'm writing that all up, I'm structuring it up, and Nick, you and I work very closely on getting that to a place where we can go out and speak to potential investors and get them really excited about this.
Great, very clear. And Paige, what operations are you working on, or are you working on something else?
No, operations, and mostly centered around kind of stakeholder engagement at the moment. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it's an enormous ecosystem that we're operating in. Lots of different people involved at various stages of the student journey. So ensuring that in each of our locations, that we've kind of identified who needs to be kept updated, who needs to be sent regular communications, but more importantly, who needs to be involved in this collaborative effort. It's the saying that it takes a village, and it takes an enormous global village in this case, because it's such an enormous project. So a lot of work around that. Also thinking about other stakeholders in the international education journey. So often we think, quite rightly so, about the institutions that are doing the academic part, but there's a lot that goes on outside of the academia. So students need somewhere to live when they're studying in different locations. So working with accommodation providers who are part of that journey again, and also looking at possible CSR alignment opportunities. The work that we are doing will support the work of lots of other charities and not-for-profits. And I think that there's a lot of benefit in us working together and kind of collaborating on areas there as well.
That's really interesting. If I may, I'm going to come back to you on that. Which is, what kinds of organisation that aren't in our wonderful international education sector that resonate with international student mobility at scale?
So I spoke earlier about the risks when things go wrong. So if a student arrives to their destination country expecting a certain program, expecting somewhere to live, and then they find that vastly different, or in the worst possible case, not existing, and they then need to try and work, or they to support themselves, they're then extremely vulnerable. So can fall into dodgy, unpaid work, or at a very, very worst end, human trafficking. So organizations that support victims of human trafficking and preventing such awful occurrences, I think would be one type of organization that would be very interested in this kind of work.
Yeah, and also, I guess, not just human trafficking, but modern slavery, right? Which you touched on there, because what we've undoubtedly seen in almost all of the destinations is students ending up in modern slavery circumstances because they were unable to find the job that they thought that they would be able to get, but needed to support themselves in order to sustain their studies. And hey presto, they're suddenly victims of modern slavery. Yeah, I totally get that. So we need to wrap up. It's been a fabulously interesting conversation, and to hear your various different, very different perspectives. So I'm going to ask one final question, which is, what in your view is the most exciting thing that GERSA can deliver? Back to you, Birgit.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that renewing the license to operate. So it is not a given that international education is allowed to operate in the sector. I think it's now been going on for so many years and decades that we forget that that's not a given. But go back to the early 90s, and the markets were not as open to international students, and it was much more difficult to go abroad to study. So that's actually a fairly recent thing, and we need to maintain that. At the moment, our license to operate is massively under threat, and we need to renew that by instilling trust in the sector through transparency and through clear standards that we all follow. So I think that's the huge contribution to the sector.
Fantastic. And Paige?
Yeah, I mean, really to echo what Birgit said, it's two things for me. It's enhanced trust, particularly to those outside of the industry, but also widening participation. So ideally enabling a more diverse student base to be able to participate in international study. Oftentimes it feels like the world is in many ways getting smaller and kind of less trusting and less accepting. And I don't know, I personally feel that international education is the perfect antidote to that. It's not just about knowledge acquisition in a destination. It's about cultural exchange. It's as enriching, I think, for the student as it is for the institutions and the places that they study. I saw that in my little hometown, where all of a sudden for 6 weeks in the summer there were people from all over the world that would never otherwise be there. So it's a really wonderful thing. And on the widening participation piece, there's a really lovely quote, and I wish it was mine, but sadly it's not. And that's, talent is global, but opportunity isn't. So really being able to kind of open the doors further to more students studying is a really exciting prospect.
I love that quote. That is duly noted. So thank you both very much indeed. May I just say that everyone's looking very smart on the podcast today, which is, JD Vance, we're showing some respect here. Very informative, very interesting. Thank you very much for contributing your perspectives. And just to let our audience know, podcast number 4, we're getting out of the echo chamber that is the founders of GERSA, and we're going to be bringing on board our cousins from across the pond, our 2 current advisory board members, Eddie West and Jill Blondin, and they'll be telling us about what's going on in the US, which will probably be out of date within 30 minutes of them saying it, and also where GERSA can fit into the US landscape. So that will be the next edition. For this edition, thank you both very much indeed. I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy it. And that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nick.